This podcast is certified fresh. Freshmediaworks.com.
Looking to boost your company's marketing? Look no further than Fresh MediaWorks. Podcasting is the best way to promote your brand and increase your customer base. You can create your own show, be a guest on other podcasts, or advertise on existing podcasts to reach a valuable audience. Don't wait. Start elevating your marketing game today with Fresh MediaWorks. Call now, 713-269-4620, or find us online at freshmediaworks.com/podcasting.
Welcome everyone to another edition of MasterCoaches Wednesday Weekly Buzz. I'm Bob Bertucci, joined with fellow Master Coaches Tom Hibert and Jim Stone. We're still missing Master Coach Mick Haley. He's still out sailing the seven seas. In fact, last time we had a transmission, it sounded like he had kind of rough seas going around Cape Horn, I think it was. So he'll be back. He'll be back next week. The show today will take a deep dive into the world of professional volleyball and the opening 2 weeks of the PVF. Today we have a special treat for all you volleyball enthusiasts. Joining us for another Master Coaches Weekly Buzz is Jen Spicher, CEO of Pro Volleyball Federation. Jen, it's a pleasure to have you on the show.
It's a pleasure to be here. Thank you so much for having me again. Appreciate it.
Well, excellent. I know we have a lot to cover, so let's not waste any time and dive straight into the questions. Tom, how would you like to kick us off?
Well, thanks, Bob. And Jen, thanks for joining us. I want to ask again, because you're into week 3 of the season, give us a little idea of how live attendance is going. What are you seeing in each of these venues?
So first of all, our first 5 matches, we've had over 42,500 in paid attendance. And considering many of these games were during a weeknight, Wednesday for the home opener, Grand Rapids' home opener was the next night on Thursday. Atlanta's home opener was a Thursday. I think that's pretty impressive. So we're really excited about that. I'm in Omaha as we speak. The Omaha Supernovas are playing the Vegas Thrill tonight. And I spoke with Diane Mendenhall, their president, and she mentioned they're expecting upwards of 9,500 people tonight for the match at the CHI Center.
Great.
So, Jen, kind of a question, I guess, attached to attendance. Does the league office have input relative to ticket prices at the various venues? And kind of a part 2 of that, I'm assuming all the franchises are selling season tickets. Do you have any information relative to the number of season tickets that are being sold at the various franchises?
So the league does not have necessarily control over ticket pricing. We obviously are set up so that the team ownerships can be autonomous in their market and set the prices as whatever their market's going to bear. We've certainly given our opinion and shared some of our insights, given our experience with professional sports leagues. As far as season tickets, I'm not going to quote on the specifics of each team, but I can tell you that we have over 7,000 season tickets sold at each combined for each of our markets.
Jen, you said that the league doesn't have control over the ticket price, but how about if a franchise starts going a little bit out of line, with the pricing and it affects their attendance? Are you going to be able to do anything about that, or
Well, that's certainly something we would look at, right? If they were having trouble selling tickets, we'd certainly jump in and help them with that and make some determinations. But at this time, that hasn't been the case. We've got lots of season ticket holders. We've got lots of paid attendance. Many of the markets I've learned, Bob, and that I wasn't aware of, but Omaha and Atlanta and Orlando specifically told me they're in arena executives that they're big walk-up markets, meaning they get a lot of people last minute that come right to the ticket window and buy tickets. So, while I have a ticket guy that says, we've got 6,500 on sold in Orlando for Saturday, it might end up being 95.
Well, that's about the fan base is one of the questions I wanted to ask. Is it primarily coming from, the local volleyball community or the general public?
Well, I mean, if you have been to all three of the first matches, I can tell you there were lots of clubs there. There was I think Orlando created a kid zone where they had tickets for either $5 or $10, and it was all kids, and it was a crazy atmosphere. But I've seen lots of dads and volleyball girls. I've seen lots of moms. I've seen lots of families. I've seen lots of people that are volleyball enthusiasts that don't, that are empty nesters. So I think it's kind of a little bit of smattering of everything, particularly in Omaha, where volleyball is crazy here.
And so you're all marketing to clubs, I guess, and there is some group cut rates and that kind of stuff that the different franchises are offering.
Yeah, you can get group rates.
Do you see a lot of communication with the local clubs in those areas?
Well, there is a lot of communication. I know the teams are doing their community outreach. The league is going to launch our community outreach very soon. You'll hear about that in the very near future. But each of the teams does go to clubs. I think Atlanta was just at one of their local clubs doing a little clinic, and a couple of their athletes were there. But certainly outreach to the local clubs is important, particularly now that they're in season. As you know, club teams are in season. So it'll be interesting to see when you've got say Big South, for example, and I think we've got an Atlanta game right after Big South, and how that attendance will be.
Yeah, that was going to be my next question, so you answered it. So moving on to TV, I'd like you to explain again, because there's probably some new viewers who weren't in last week, about how people pick up games on YouTube, and then also comment, and I know you can't talk about specific contracts, but comment about generally what your vision is for television for this league into the future.
So people can watch the matches on YouTube, our YouTube channel. Just so you know, we've had over 360,000 people view the first 5 matches on our YouTube channel. So people are pleased with it. They're pretty happy with the production. At the end of the day, it's easy to get to, and it's easy to rewatch, which is super convenient. We did sign a deal with CBS Sports, and those matches, I think they're going to do 10. Those are towards the end of the season after they get done with the NCAA basketball, and they'll be covering our championship as well. In addition, we do have a contract that we're in negotiation with. I don't think it's any big secret with Stadium and Bally's, but it is still in negotiation, so I really can't comment on that one.
Hey, Jen, kind of staying with the TV. I mean, I'm hanging on with my fingernails with the whole streaming changes that seemingly are coming across every day. I mean, I just read today where Disney and ESPN are putting together a streaming package for this upcoming year. And you're on YouTube now. Pardon me. How does the revenue go with that? Like, is the YouTube broadcast a revenue producer for the league? Will it be at some point? I mean, there's advertising. Do you guys initiate the advertising? I mean, can you kind of talk a little bit about the whole dynamics of streaming, advertising, and potential revenue sources?
So the league doesn't really confirm any financial details of our agreements with our partners, and I'm sure you can appreciate that. We're just excited to have CBS Sports Network and YouTube as outlets for our fans to watch our amazing athletes. At the end of the day, our goal in the future is to have more national broadcast partners. We certainly have been talking to 2 or 3 more for the rest of this season and for 2025 and beyond. But yeah, I'm not going to comment on any financial commitment deals or agreements. Spoken like a true CEO, right, guys?
Yeah, exactly.
Well, thanks, Jen. I know that's difficult, but let's change gears a little bit. Let's talk about the level of play on the court. There were some spectacular plays, the first 5 matches, or for the last 2 weeks. How do you feel the play has been overall? And do you see anything, any improvement in between week 1 and week 2?
Well, I don't know that I could comment on week 1 or week 2. I mean, my coaching days are over, and it certainly was never at this high level. What I can say is that these ladies have had 3 weeks in training camp and now 2 weeks of actual matches. I think Atlanta's had the most matches with 3, and Vegas hasn't even played yet. Tonight's their first match. When you're in a training camp with a new setter or setters, you've got some timing issues and you've got some other things that you're working out the kinks. And I think that the level of play in week 1 was very, very strong. When you look at our player of the week in Allie Linehan, our second week player of the week, and how Leah Edmond crushed it. We've had a lot of phenomenal performances. Claire Chassé in Grand Rapids in 3 matches hit 21 kills. I mean, I wonder if that had gone to a 5-setter, how many times she would have swung. But week 2 is going to be different than week 4, and week 4 is going to be not as good as week 6. It's just called time in the gym and time to mold and meld and time to get familiar with your teammates and defensive schemes, and knowing that Hens is always going to go for 50% of the side of her court, and whoever's on the other side, those two can hash it out. But at the end of the day, I'm super pleased with the attendance. We're super pleased with the viewership. We love the fact that these athletes are happy. They're really enjoying what they're doing, and they're really enjoying doing it in front of their family and their fans and their friends.
Yeah, I did notice a little bit of communication breakdowns that first week, and a little bit of ball control issues in that first week. But it seemed as it went into the second week, at least the teams that had played already, there was a natural improvement that was occurring, and I think that's pretty exciting for the level of play and the league in general.
And that's just going to get better over time, don't you think?
No, I think you're right. I think it will.
Yeah, and I think my observations are that the players seem to be having a great time playing, which I think is really good for the culture of the sport and may attract fans, especially young ones. I
think it absolutely is, and I think it's contagious, right? Mm-hmm. They're having a great time playing. They're having a great time playing in their home stadiums, and I've been in the locker rooms before the matches, and I take a box of Sharpies in with me and make sure everybody has 2 in their bag at all times because they're becoming superstars. Brooke Nuneviller will tell you she was in CVS the other day and somebody came up to her and wanted her autograph. That doesn't happen when you're sitting in Turkey or France or Switzerland. So I told them all, I said, you guys better invest in Sharpies.
That's a great call. So can we talk contracts for a second? Because I have a bunch of layers here. Is there a process in place for players who finish a contract overseas to join an existing roster?
Well, they can, that's between the coach and the player. At the end of the day, if one of the coaches thinks that they need help somewhere and they can identify a player that is either coming off a contract or coming done with the season. Kat Bell, for example, just finished in China. She obviously just got to the States. I think she flew in on Friday, spent a couple days at home, and was with the Vegas Thrill on Sunday. That's a perfect example of somebody who is going to be able to help that Vegas Thrill team. She's a 10-year pro. She's played all over the world, and she's a dynamic, phenomenal star, and she's ready to do it home in front of her family and friends, and she's super excited to be here. So there is an avenue for that, but it's completely up to the coach and the teams and the player. Okay.
So, and are there FIVB implications on that? Are you guys involved with them? I mean, did they 100%. Basically, are they over your league?
Well, we are following the FIVB standards. We are making sure that all the FIVB transfers happen before the athletes hit the floor. We pay the FIVB, we pay NORCECA, we pay whoever we need to pay in order to have their transfer paperwork completed. Some of the countries, as you know, Tom, require payment to the country or the Federation of Origin. So for example, the Puerto Rican Federation of Origin charges 10% of their contract, and then you have to pay that, plus then you have to pay NORCECA. And so that's something that we're managing through. And certainly every one of our players that doesn't have a USA Federation of Origin has gone through the appropriate FIVB transfer process. We work very closely with USA Volleyball and Carla Hall to ensure that those athletes are appropriately transferred. And when they're waived or cut or they are traded or whatever the situation may be, then they're released as well.
All right. And all these same things apply to international players that are coming to. For example, I think you, if I'm not mistaken, you have a limit on how many international players can be on a roster.
We do. This first year it was 2.
Okay.
Knowing that we're going to increase and expand our league next year, we haven't come to an official decision, but the owners and the league have talked about potentially increasing the internationals to 3 or 4. What's been really great is, I don't know if you know this, Tom, but in the first few months of our league, we had to get an O visa. An O visa is because we didn't have any revenue and we weren't necessarily a professional league yet, according to the United States, immigration services. But we just recently had 2 of our players switch to a P visa, which is fantastic for us. Now we can bring professional athletes over much quicker, much easier, and much less expensive.
That's great. And, this is my last one, but if you mentioned that Cat Bell came over, does Cat Bell then bump a current player off of a roster since you have roster limitations? How does that work?
Well, that's up to the teams and the coaches. I'm assuming that knowing Fran Flory knew Cat was coming, she probably cut her roster to 13 so that she didn't have a 14th player that she had to waive after the signing period. But between you and me, if there's a player identified, say in April, and a team is making a run for the championships and a coach thinks that a player over that is, either an international or a U.S. player is going to help them win, then they're absolutely at their legal right to go get that individual and make the decision of who they're replacing on their roster. And that's 100% within their realm.
Thank you.
Hey, Jen, as you were talking there, I'm scribbling myself notes about all these questions that you fostered that are not on our script. So I'm going to go off script here a little bit, but just a question of curiosity.
Oh, no.
I don't understand the process too much. You mentioned that, Puerto Rico has a 10% charge on contracts or a fee or whatever the proper terminology is. Does that 10% come out of the player's portion of the contract, or does the league upfront that as
the team? The league upfronts it, and then we build back the teams. So the teams know when they sign an international or a Puerto Rican player or an Orseca player what those costs most likely are going to be, and the teams are paying for those individuals.
Got it. And part 2 of my off-script questions, there's 12 players on a roster and then 2 practice players. Is that correct?
There's 14 active roster players and 2 practice players.
Oh.
The 2 practice players must be drafted, college drafted kids or athletes.
Okay. And they're on payroll?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
Okay.
They don't make quite as much as the people on an active roster.
Sure.
But as a practice player, they're still making more than they would have made had they gone over to Europe for a half season.
Okay. And what's the thought pattern behind they have to be the 2 practice players I'm talking about, they have to be college draftees?
Well, Jim, our average tenure of pro athletes is over 5 years. And so I don't know if you watched or saw our draft. We had 5 rounds each team drafted 5 college players. And of those 35 drafted players, 30 of them came to camp, which I think is a phenomenal number for our very first year.
Sure.
The other 5, 2 of them didn't continue playing. 1 of them is in Europe, and the other 2, I think, are in Puerto Rico. But at the end of the day, to get 30 of our 35 kids that we drafted into our league, and many of them made the active roster. But the practice player designation is really to give these NCAA, graduates coming out of college an opportunity for a path to the pros here in the United States.
Excellent.
And securing those two spots really does afford them an opportunity to learn and to take the time to become a professional athlete in all the senses of the word, not just the performance of them as an athlete, but getting into the routine and the lifting and the weights and the mental mindset. All of it can be a lot for a young player coming in and giving them an opportunity to make a practice squad gives them that sense of the time that they're going to need to delve into to become great players.
Well, I'm 100% on board with that. I think that's a great thing because so many of these college players, they come out of a system that doesn't necessarily translate to the professional system, and to take a year or possibly 2 years to get up to speed. I think it's awesome that the league is willing to create those positions and allow the growth that you just described. But okay, I'm back on script now, Jen. So since you're in Omaha, do you want to comment at all on the coaching change that just happened with the Omaha franchise?
Well, I found out about an hour before you did. At the end of the day, the teams make those decisions, right? And if they felt that that was the best decision for their team, then so be it. I don't have any other comment other than the league doesn't make those decisions, the teams do. And, I applaud them if they feel like that's the move that they needed to make. I think Shelton is a wonderful individual. I've spent a lot of time working with him. I think Bird is fantastic. I think their entire coaching staff, as well as their ownership team and their front office, is a fantastic group of individuals that just want to see the Omaha Supernovas do well and these girls flourish. So whatever decisions they made, and I stand by them.
Fair enough.
Jen, is by moving Shelton, does he become now general manager? Is he just a consultant? I mean, he was 1-1. I mean, he's a Hall of Fame coach. One of the most experienced coaches, even now in the pro league. So is this them expanding their franchise?
So I haven't had a chance to speak to anybody there. I will be speaking to them tonight. I believe they called it an advisor role. To be honest, I mean, this is also the time when many of the teams are starting to look to 2025, and there are plenty of women, United States women, sitting in Europe that are playing on teams that aren't going to go back in 2025 because the Olympic cycle will be done. And so, maybe they're going to use him to start recruiting others to the league. But at this point, I haven't had a chance to speak with them, so I can't really opine on that.
Well, we're talking about players. Let's delve into the player demographics. What's the percentage of college players, international players, national team, Olympic players in the league right now?
So I'll just give you some numbers that I had my team throw at me. 10 different countries. So we have players representing 10 different countries. We have 17 athletes that have been in the USA national team gym. As I mentioned, 30 of the 35 that were drafted came to camp. We had 138 women in training camp. We've had over 45% growth in our Instagram account in the month of January 2024 alone. And as I mentioned earlier, we had 42,300 in attendance for the first 5 matches. As far as percentage of NCAA versus pros, I'm not exactly sure what that percentage is, but as you know, there's at least a couple practice players on every single team. And a number of these women that were drafted in December did make the roster. I was just downstairs talking to Kylie Muir and Gabby Gonzalez and Hannah Maddox, all 3 drafted players for Vegas, and they're all 3 on the roster. So we're excited, and they're excited and pumped up to play.
Hey, Jen, kind of on the same topic, you mentioned last week that that some of the players are being re-signed for next year currently, and that I guess that means that some, at this point anyway, have not been offered contracts for next year. Are there deadlines that are in place where after a certain date, a player would consider themselves a free agent if they haven't been offered another contract? And with that title, do they start negotiating with other teams, even though the season may not be complete for their own team now?
So each of the athletes has signed a 1-year contract. We did that specifically because we knew we would have many opportunities for expansion teams, and we do. As you know, Indy, Kansas City, Dallas, and we're talking to 2 others that are close for 2025. I mean, that's almost doubling the league. And we wanted the athletes to be able to make a decision and potentially reshuffle if they wanted to maybe a market that's either closer to home or maybe is home. And so they have the opportunity to do that. They certainly can sign at any time with their current team, or they can wait until the contract signing period opens, which is going to be in a couple weeks here, and potentially look at other teams. It's a little bit tricky, as you can imagine, because we're in season and we're trying to keep these athletes focused on their games that are coming up. But I'll tell you, they're all very excited about what they're doing and who they're playing with, and the league that they're playing in, and they obviously now realize it is real. The matches have been very well attended. They're very well contested, and they're really loving the competition.
Jen, another aspect of these contracts, I assume, are NIL. What's the league doing to support, the personal branding, and the name, image, and likeness of some of these athletes?
Well, I mean, we're doing a lot when it comes to telling the athletes' stories, and we'll be doing a lot on social, but it's really up to the teams. And certainly the teams, the athletes can go out and secure sponsorships. So a couple of these athletes have sponsorships with specific brands in their markets, and they can certainly use that for an additive income, if you will. But it's not the league doing it for the athlete. It's either the athlete or their agent and or the teams, the ownership groups and whatnot that are helping them along the way and mentoring them with sponsorships in their markets.
Can you, without going into numbers, give us some examples of some of the deals you've seen that have been pretty, lucrative for the players?
Well, I know that one player was being paid, to represent a dealership, right? And that was in the between 10 and 20,000. So that's a nice little change for that individual. And there's others. I've been approached by no less than 6 companies that want to reach out and sponsor a player per team, which is terrific. And so I connect them with the teams and let them make those decisions. That's not a league decision. That's a player and team decision.
All right.
So is most of the NIL stuff being based through the franchise more than the league? Is that what you're saying?
Right. And then the league just approves the sponsorship agreement. So I see all the agreements that come through and we approve those. And we, keep those on file to make sure that we have a record of those.
So I want to go back to competition from other leagues, because you have Japan is starting to pay pretty lucratively to players. I'm sure you're going to have competition from international leagues, but also we were talking on Monday about, I'm assuming that the PVF would like to bring some of the best players in the world into the United States to play. So what are your thoughts on that? How are you going to handle that as you move forward?
Well, I think that a lot of the questions were answered by our product, by putting our product, on the floor. I think people understand exactly what they have here. It's a volleyball league that has fierce rivalries and it's competitive, and it's a great product. It's an exciting product. It's certainly a step up from Division I NCAA in that these athletes are stronger. They're more powerful. They're quicker. They're more agile. We're here to compete, Tom, and we're going to put a great product on the floor, and we're going to compete with whichever leagues want to try to be a startup in this in the United States. And I can tell you, having just done it, it's not easy. It's hard, and things get thrown at you. Curveballs get thrown at you every single day. And as my husband will tell you, you need to learn how to hit the curve because you got to be flexible and you got to know how to hit the curve, because some of these leagues that are starting, they're gonna see what I'm talking about.
Hey, Jen, kind of staying with the world of contracts. I'm going to go off script here again. Sorry about that, but
again,
I'm totally uncoachable. But an aggressive owner of a franchise, if they set up sponsorship opportunities in their community or whatever the avenue is for a sponsorship, you have a base salary of $60,000, but in reality, a player could make much more than that. Is that at the prerogative of the owner who's willing to set up, NIL deals and supplement a player's contract beyond the base salary?
It's not up to the owner. Like I said, I do approve all sponsorship agreements, And so, if it's something that looks a little wacky or out of bounds, we'll certainly bring it back into bounds and within the league standards.
But is that a way? Is that a way to supplement the contracts so that you can attract better players and compete with?
It certainly can be.
Okay, so looking ahead, you have post-Olympics where I would assume some of the Olympians from whatever country might be interested in coming to play in your league, but they probably won't do it for $60,000. Is there a way that, and maybe it's not official yet, but is there a thought pattern that, hey, we need to be able to structure contracts to appeal to some of these top players so we're getting the best in the world playing in the PVF?
We've not decided the overall, what I would call salary cap for 2025 yet. We still have to have our owners meeting in reference to that. As you can imagine, we're still busy trying to get the first 2 weeks going. But the initial thought is that from the owners and from some of the coaches is that they want to be able to have some malleability, some flexibility in contracts. Here's what I will tell you: we aren't going to pay anything less than $60,000, but it could certainly be more in 2025. And I expect that those conversations are going to happen in the next couple of weeks because obviously we, in Europe they're already starting to try and sign players. I think the some of the players from the U.S. have already seen contracts that want to keep them there, and many of them have connected with me and told me that they want to come home. So we're going to need to get on that pretty hard pretty soon, and we will do that. But again, that's something that we might flex from the first year into the second as the ownership and the coaches have looking for a desire to do that.
Okay, fair enough. Okay, I'm back on script now. Coach Bertucci has his finger on the pulse of all the volleyball rumors going on in our country, and he seems to feel that League One is offering lucrative contracts to players that are currently playing inside of your league. Have you heard those rumors? And is that just part of the competitive nature of competing leagues?
Well aware, and yeah, it's part of competing leagues. At the end of the day, again, love that we have multiple leagues in our view now. But I think there's still quite a bit of confusion, as you guys know, of what Love's product really is. None of the athletes know what the championship looks like. They don't know where they're going to play. They don't know who's going to coach them. They say they have 50% of their players signed, but they won't tell any of the athletes who's signed with them. So there's still a lot of cloudiness over there. And, my heart goes out to them. Best of luck in continuing to build your league. We've built ours. Everybody knows what our product is. And I think people are pretty excited about it. And like I said before, we're here to compete.
Does the FIVB play any role in that kind of, I guess, for lack of a better term, poaching situation?
It would only really be poaching if they were under contract, right? And we have a number of players that have already re-signed, for this year. So not to my knowledge, I haven't had to engage in that conversation, but if I need to, I will.
All right. And I'm going to go loop back to international players because you're at the limit that you installed this year. Is there any plans in the future to increase the number of international players if you think it'll make the league better?
Yep. We've already talked about 3 or 4 for next year. Haven't really talked about, X amount on the floor at any one time. But yeah, I believe that we'll be increasing that. It's certainly an owner's decision, and we have to have that conversation. I've brought it up to them a couple of times. And like I said earlier, now that we have the ability to get a P visa, that brings the time invested in getting an athlete over, as well as the costs invested in getting an athlete over to a much more reasonable amount. So I don't see any reason why we wouldn't, but at the same time, it needs to be approved by our owners, and that hasn't happened yet. But I expect that we will, to keep the level of play up and the interest up.
So, Jen, you've alluded to, and I don't know if you call them Love or you call them League One, because we can't get them on to find out anything about this league, which makes it really kind of surprising that they're out actually talking to athletes right now and promising contracts, and we, and nobody knows a whole lot about them other than occasionally we'll see them come on a scene and advertise a little bit. But I realize it's a very competitive environment in pro athletics. How are you going to respond to that?
You know what? It's great for the athletes. Have you seen the 2025 class coming out? Do you know how loaded that class is, particularly with six rotation outside hitters? I think there's room for plenty. I mean, I'm not worried about it at all. Many of the players that they've signed, if you look at them, they're all in their last season of a quad or several quads of the Olympics, right? They're in their mid-30s, and they're Olympians, and that'll be a great opportunity for them to show their stuff. But we still don't know what that looks like, Bob. We have no idea what that looks like as far as how many matches they're going to play, how many road, how many away. Like you said, who's their coaches? Because the players don't even know who their coaches are. Because I've asked, and they're having informational meetings, and they can't tell the players that they want to sign anything about the league, or they're refusing to. The other thing I've heard is they're putting them on a clock. They're giving them 48 hours. And what I'll tell my players, and what I'll tell anybody that has a contract in front of them is if there's a clock, there's a problem. There's something there that could be a concern. I mean, I've never given any of our players a deadline, and certainly never will. So at the end of the day, I'm not sure what that's all about. But again, I invite you to have them on, and I'm sure the entire volleyball community would love to know what's afoot with that.
Well, you're right. We'll probably have to reach out again. We've reached out a couple of times, and I know there's interest in the volleyball community to find out what's really going on and what's really going to happen. At one point, it looked like they were trying to model after the European model, if you will, where clubs were the base of support, and then a club would develop a pro team and move on from there. But I don't even know if that's still happening or not. So I would love to have them on. But before we let you go, I got to ask my normal question I always ask you. You already mentioned that Dallas, Kansas City, and Indy are in for 2025. You hinted that you have a couple of other cities that are just in the beginning phase of exploring it. Can you give us some ideas of some of the other cities that the PVF would like to see come in for 2025?
Well, first of all, those three that you mentioned have been working now for the better part of almost a year to put their front office, back office, and teams together. I think one of them is ready to announce a head coach. The other two are in the throes of interviewing. So we're going to welcome them with open arms to Real Pro Volleyball, and we're excited about that. There are probably, in the last 10 days, I have probably been reached out to by 8 different potential investment groups interested in putting a team in their city. And you name the city, and I'm talking to a group. The real question is which cities are going to get far enough along that they can play and be successful to have an opening match in January of 2025. And I think there's 2, maybe 4 that we probably will get there with. Definitely Northeast and definitely Northwest, which opens up our geographic a little bit. Also Southeast and Southwest. So to give you a couple of other hints, and certainly plenty in the middle. But at the end of the day, we have, since we've gone live, the sponsorships are coming out of the woodwork, the investment opportunities for people that want to have a team in their city, and the amount of calls that we're doing that are, kind of intro calls to, well, this is what it costs, and this is what, your budget looks like, and this is what the commitment is, et cetera, have been rampant. And we're thrilled with the outreach from the various teams and from the various cities and from the various investment groups about wanting to have a team in their city. And we'll continue to have those conversations until we lock down our teams for 2025. And then all those teams that we're talking to that didn't make that deadline will get pushed into 2026.
Well, thanks, Jen. Fascinating conversation with Jen Spicher, the Chief Executive Officer of Pro Volleyball Federation. On behalf of Tom, Jim, and myself, I'd like to thank you for taking so much time out of your busy schedule, especially with the match tonight in Omaha, and sharing your insights and expertise with us today. Thanks very much, Jen.
Thanks for having me on, guys. See you later.
Okay.
Thank you.
Tom, I know you only have a few minutes, so you're going to be jumping off, and we're going to take a little commercial break here. So before we just continue our discussion, let's just take a moment, to hear from our sponsors at NSA Sports Group, where we're looking for if you're looking for top quality volleyball equipment for your team or facility, you don't need to look any further than SNA Sports Group.
When you're talking about volleyball equipment, Collegiate 4000 is our benchmark, and it's our most popular system. At 22 and 27 pounds for the post weight, it's very easy to carry around. And I've seen middle schools as well as high school teams be able to set it up in under 5 minutes consistently. It uses our international net, which is a really unique net design. It doesn't slide back and forth on the top and bottom ropes. You actually hook the 4 points up, tighten everything up, and you're ready to play. Regardless of your sleeve size, whether they're 4-inch, 3.5, or 3-inch, we can modify our posts to fit that. They'll drop right in with a lifetime warranty on the post and a lifetime warranty on the winch. We're covering all of the real major components of the net system. We have infinite net height adjustability on the slide rail, from men's height all the way down to tennis if needed. And it's also infinitely upgradable. You don't really have to buy posts again. You can always just upgrade the rails and keep on going with whatever new technology we come out with. So if you're looking for a lightweight and versatile net system that's a snap to set up, I wouldn't look any further than the Collegiate. If you're interested, please give me a call. I'd love to talk with you.
Well, welcome back. Just a quick, comment on SNA Sports. I mean, they have, decades of experience and commitment to the sport of volleyball. They have everything you need to elevate your game. And if you're interested, go to snasportsgroup.com and you can learn more today. All right, Jim, let's switch over to our buzz reaction. It's just me and you right now for our buzz reaction. What's your thoughts about what Jen had to say about some of those topics?
First of all, I'm pretty impressed with Jen and her staff and her team for getting things going over the past, 18 months, 2 years, and having the whole project, come to fruition. People are out playing and people are buying tickets. And I just think what she's done is just short of unbelievable. And, to get 7, 8, 9, 10,000 people in the crowd and watching players play volleyball, and having a viable contract system and people are getting paid, and what a heavy lift that is. And, like I said, her team have done a great job. And now the challenges don't stop. I mean, how do we keep this thing going? And I think there's going to be significant challenges ahead. And, I alluded to, post-Olympics, can we get some of the best players in the world in this league? And, like NBA, I don't think anyway, have any sort of number restrictions. They just want good players on teams. They don't care if they're from Mars. So if we can get where the top players are coming to the United States instead of Italy or Turkey, what an exciting thing that would be, and so there's challenges ahead, but as I said, I think Jen and her staff have done a great job getting things going.
Well, I think you're right, and you're not going to believe the phone call I've just gotten. I don't know if you can hear it, but I got Mick Haley on the phone in some boat in one of those oceans he's visiting right now. Mick, can you hear us?
I can. You guys are doing great.
So I guess you must have been able to at least catch part of the show.
I just got Jim's last statement. Yeah.
All right, Jim. I don't know if you can you hear Mick right now?
Yeah, I can hear him fine.
Okay. So, Mick, questions you might have about our topic today, or questions you would have liked Jen to expand on a little bit.
Well, I like the questions you were going to ask her. I think it opens up a whole lot of new things that we hadn't thought about, or that maybe people haven't thought about. One of the things that I thought was important that hasn't happened yet, though, we don't seem to get a rundown on trades, injuries, who's available for rosters each week, things like that. Did you guys talk about any of that?
So trades and roster changes, we did talk about a little bit, right, Jim? I think that might have been one of your questions, actually.
Yeah, I mean, she pretty much alluded to it's coach's discretion in terms of keeping players or letting them go or trading. And she said everything had to be approved by the league office, but they don't have any real input on any sort of player transactions.
No, what I was referring to is we'd like to know what each team is doing each week. And we'd like to see, the NFL, they publish what's happening. We get a line in the paper of who's been traded, who's sent down, who may not be available, who's available for matches. I'd like to see that as a next step. I just wondered if there was any discussion about that coming out of either the league offices or out of each franchise publishing that each week before the matches start.
Yeah, I don't think we addressed that at all. But I think there might become a need for that to actually happen because they're getting more and more interest in the league, and anybody that's following the league is going to want to know, if they picked up any new players, who's injured. And of course, with the onset of gambling in all of sports, that's going to be pretty important for the league to control, I would think. Mick, you're right.
The other thing relative to what Jim was saying is that Japan seems to have added more teams to their top league and are bringing in additional foreign players. Is that going to cause a player drain, or are they doing that hopefully to not lose foreign players to the U.S. leagues? Has anybody researched that?
Well, we did discuss that a little bit, right, Jim, on the show, at least relative to how, the PVF's going to react to it. And they are entertaining, possibly adding some international players for next year's roster. And Jen talked a lot, right, Jim, about the competitive landscape of pro athletics and being able to attract the best players.
Yeah, I think she's not naive to what's going on around the world, but they will have to do something with the salary structure, and she said that they were looking at it now. But to attract the top players, they're the Japan League is an example. Certainly, Turkey's an example. The top players are making more than $60,000. So I guess it's more of a philosophical question. What direction do they want to go with the league? Do they want to bring in the best in the world and be the NBA of volleyball? Or do they, do they want to make it more of a USA centric type of organization? And, as I mentioned earlier, I hope they aggressively recruit and have the wherewithal to bring in the top players.
This certainly sounds like a player's market, doesn't it, for the future right now with several leagues in the United States and the other leagues feeling the pinch of maybe losing players to certain leagues. Would be great to be a player right now, wouldn't it?
I would say, if you're a player, you're kind of in the driver's seat.
Both professionally and collegiately.
and there is another rub. My concern about, did did Shelton Collier get promoted with his consultant position, or was it a situation of the tail wagging the dog, where when players don't make the starting team, or they get dropped to the second team, or they see that they're going to get traded, is that having the same impact, in this pro league as it is having in collegiate athletics right now? I mean, I'd like to see pro league be, you win, you win. If you lose, you lose, and you got to go look for another job or another. So I don't know what you guys think about that.
Well, I mean, who knows? I mean, Shelton knows, and maybe the people inside the Omaha franchise knows. But I hate to put a lot of credibility in the rumor mill. I know Shelton's a good coach, but there's a lot of good coaches that in the various sports, NBA, NFL, that were good in collegiate and weren't as good in professionally, and vice versa. So who knows what went on? But I do know that Shelton's a good coach, and certainly wish him the best moving forward.
Well, if they're expanding their franchise, I mean, making him a general manager makes a lot of sense, because you're going to want to have somebody out there getting the best players in the world coming to your franchise, especially if you're Omaha and you're putting 10,000 people in and 11,000 people in every game that you're playing.
We talked about this. We talked about players. We talked about coaches. But, the one thing we haven't talked about is franchise management. And if you take pro sports, you look at the Los Angeles Angels, maybe it's the Anaheim Angels. They'd like to be known as Los Angeles because they want to market there, but they really play in the Major League Baseball circuit in Anaheim. They had Ohtani. They didn't Ohtani and Trout. Wouldn't you think you could put together a team that challenges every year with those two guys? And yet, it seems like they flounder yearly. I like their new coach they hired, but why not hired him some time ago? Because he's really a guy who wins, and seems like he really likes the way he runs that operation. But you look at teams that flounder, like the Clippers for years floundered until they really got a professional group and a management group in there to take effect. We might be seeing some of this in the new pro league, where franchise management at the top levels needs to take a serious look at who's doing what also.
Mick, to your point, I know Jerry West was supposed to be the talent ID guy behind the LA Lakers for many years. And, I think similar to athletic departments in college, teams aren't good. Collegiate teams aren't good by accident. There's an athletic director and an athletic staff that are providing the infrastructure for success. And as you mentioned, I think a general manager that has a keen eye for talent and has the ability to put together the various components of a team into a successful franchise might be arguably more important than who the coach is.
Well, and if that's the role that Shelton's moving into, they couldn't be asking for a better person in terms of his experience. And I mean, Jim, we've all recruited against Shelton. He's the only guy that would write a handwritten letter every day to every one of his recruits. I mean, the guy knows what he's doing, and it'd be great to have somebody like that in a franchise like Omaha.
Well, I certainly think if that wasn't a positive move, that the new franchises should be looking at him right away. He's been through one draft already. He's been through one international search for players. He knows the pitfalls of what you can fall into. He's maybe the next guy up for one of these new franchises, because he's had one to practice on.
Well, changing gears a little bit, Jim, you mentioned this during the show, and I want to throw this out to both of you guys. College rules versus pro rules. How long do you think it's going to take before college is going to actually change their rules to be closer to the pro and international level? And I'd like to hear what you guys have to say about that.
Well, I think if there's a rule change, it's going to be player driven, because they want to. But by player driven, I mean they're not going to pound their fists on the table saying we want rule changes, but they're going to go to schools that will prepare them for a professional career. And I've heard for so many years from college coaches that it's not our job to prepare players for the national team or consequently a pro league. And that was easy to say when there was no pro league. But now with potentially 2 pro leagues that are not going to have 15 substitutions, the players are going to kind of go, college is supposed to prepare me for a career, whether it's inside of volleyball or engineering, whatever. And if you're not going to do it, I'm going to go someplace that will. And I think that would be the impetus for a rule change more than the college coaches wanting a rule change.
Mick, your thoughts?
Well, I was going to take a little bit different tact, but 2 things. Reacting to Jim, I'd like to. Well, it's going to be interesting for me to see who's going to be the Calipari of women's volleyball, because let's say you take an outside hitter that can't pass and you move her to the right side and you play her all the way around and you have her become a hammer in 6 rotations. Who's going to be the first to stay with that and do that and not use the substitutions? And secondly, I was going to say, if there's going to be a rule change or if there are going to be rule changes, I'm thinking more that international is going to change a little bit more towards the U.S. By increasing substitutions, maybe from 6 to 8. I think there's been a lot of discussion about that. They've already gone to 2 liberos, and now the U.S. has adopted the 2 liberos, which adds to more people going in and out of the game, which I think all of us would agree somewhat interrupts the flow of the beautiful part of volleyball when you have these stoppages all the time. You remember when the NBA, both you watch NBA when Tommy Heinsohn was coaching and all these guys were coaching, and there would be a timeout every second in the last 2 minutes, and then there would be back-to-back timeouts. And they made rule changes to where there could only be 1 timeout and back-to-back timeouts weren't allowed and all of those things. I think we're going to go through a lot of that, but it's going to be hard to change rules at the club and high school level because it's all about how many kids can get to play. And either we're going to have more teams and more opportunities, or you're going to keep these rules.
Well, I kind of agree with both of you. I mean, my feeling is going to take about 3 years, but we're going to see rule changes. And I think it's going to be player-driven because this pro league is the real thing. As Jim was, talking about right in the beginning and how impressed he was with Jen Spicher, I'd have to agree with them in that this league is really seeming like they're doing it right and they're in for the long haul. And I think you're going to have players at the collegiate level that are going to want to play in this league, and they're going to want to be trained that way. And eventually, you're going to start to see some changes. It'd be nice if both the FIVB and the NCAA met in the middle, and they had something that would work for both groups.
One of the problems, though, is that in the United States, we have so many players in the, let's just say Europe, in the European countries. Everybody in the country doesn't play volleyball. the top elite athletes play volleyball, and other people don't play. And we have a situation in the United States where women's volleyball is the number one women's sport in the country. And you think about that, that's why we have 6-2 offenses. That's why we have 2 liberos. That's why we double sub. All of those things go to winning, but they also go to getting more people into the games. I mean, college, high school teams have 25, 28 girls on them, and they're trying to play a match and win. It's really hard once you get to 11, playing 11 in a match or in a set. I don't think you can play many more people and still keep any kind of flow or rhythm.
Well, Mick, I think we're really talking about the elite level. And so just like what's happening in college athletics right now, you may have an elite level of volleyball teams that play a little bit different set of rules than the rest of the college teams, and all the way down through high school and club. Well, more importantly, Mick, tell us a little bit about your trip so far, because our last transmission, it sounded like you had some rough seas.
Oh, we had some unbelievably rough seas. I never tried to slip and have my body flipped up in the air and have me come down on the other side. It was pretty interesting, but we've been down around the tip of South America. We just missed the fires in Chile and went down through Patagonia. We're just coming out of Patagonia now and getting ready to head into Buenos Aires here in a couple of days. It's been a wonderful trip. We've seen some glaciers. We've seen whales. We've seen sea lions. We missed the penguins on the Falkland Islands because of the storm. But it's been a wonderful cruise and something I'm sure that I'll always remember and appreciate that we made the decision to do it.
And Jimmy's still doing volleyball. He couldn't keep away from it. He calls in on WhatsApp. He's a junkie. Well, there you have it, folks. And a special thanks to all listeners for tuning in. Until next time, this has been MasterCoaches Wednesday Weekly Buzz. Stay tuned for more volleyball excitement, and goodbye for now.